History remembers Cleopatra as a seductress, a queen draped in gold, charming the most powerful men of her time. But the truth is far more intriguing. She wasn't just a temptress who won over Julius Caesar and Mark Antony. She was a strategist, a scholar, a ruler who defied the odds. She spoke at least 9 languages, studied philosophy and science, and commanded fleets and armies. She was not even fully Egyptian but of Greek descent, the last in a long line of Ptolemaic rulers desperately holding on to power in a land that saw them as foreign kings. Her story is tangled with myths and exaggerated dramas. Some say she bathed in donkey milk to preserve her beauty. Others believe she dissolved a priceless pearl in vinegar just to prove a point. And then there's the greatest mystery of all, her death. Did she really let a venomous asp sink its fangs into her skin, or was her end something far more calculated? Cleopatra was many things: brilliant, ruthless, captivating. But above all, she was a survivor. Until, of course, she wasn't. This is the strange but true tale of one of history's most misunderstood women. Cleopatra VII was born in 69 BC in Alexandria, a city of dazzling wealth and knowledge, home to the great library of Alexandria and a melting pot of cultures. But despite being the last great pharaoh of Egypt, Cleopatra wasn't Egyptian by blood. She belonged to the Ptolemaic dynasty, a Greek family that had ruled Egypt since the days of Alexander the Great. Unlike her ancestors, who clung to their Greek roots and never bothered to learn the local language, Cleopatra embraced Egypt fully, speaking its language, adopting its customs, and presenting herself as a true daughter of the Nile. Her father, Ptolemy XII, mockingly called Auletes, the flute player, for his obsession with music over ruling, was a weak and unpopular king. He borrowed vast sums of money from Rome to secure his throne, leaving Egypt in debt and himself in a precarious position. When Cleopatra was around 11 years old, her father was exiled, forced to flee to Rome while chaos erupted in Alexandria. For years, she watched as her homeland teetered on the brink of collapse, learning a brutal lesson: power was never given, it had to be taken. When Ptolemy XII eventually clawed his way back to the throne, Cleopatra was by his side, absorbing every move he made. By the time he died in 51 BC, leaving the throne to 18-year-old Cleopatra and her 10-year-old brother, Ptolemy XIII, she knew exactly what needed to be done. But ruling Egypt would not be so simple. The country's advisors and generals had no intention of letting a young woman govern alone. As was tradition, Cleopatra was forced to marry her brother and co-rule with him, a political arrangement she despised. Cleopatra, however, was not one to be controlled. She refused to let her younger brother take the lead and soon found herself in a dangerous struggle for power. Ptolemy XIII, manipulated by his advisors, turned against her, forcing her to flee Alexandria. But exile wasn't the end for Cleopatra. It was only the beginning. She needed an ally, and there was only one man powerful enough to help her reclaim her throne, Julius Caesar. And so, with nothing but her wits and an audacious plan, she prepared to make the most legendary entrance in history. Cleopatra knew she couldn't simply walk into Alexandria and demand her throne back. Her brother, Ptolemy XIII, had the city in his grip, backed by powerful advisors who wanted her gone. But fortune had handed her a rare opportunity. Julius Caesar, the most powerful man in Rome, had arrived in Alexandria to settle Egypt's royal dispute. If she could win him over, she could reclaim her throne. The challenge? Ptolemy's forces guarded every entrance to the palace, and she was an outlaw in her own kingdom. What happened next became the stuff of legend. Cleopatra arranged for her most loyal servant to smuggle her into the palace under the cover of night. Some say she was rolled inside a rug. Others believe it was a linen sack. Either way, when the fabric was unrolled before Caesar, out tumbled not a desperate exile, but a queen. She was only 21, but she carried herself with the confidence of a ruler twice her age. Cleopatra didn't rely solely on her beauty. Despite later Roman propaganda painting her as a seductress, she was known more for her intelligence, wit, and charisma. She spoke to Caesar as an equal, using logic, charm, and an unshakable belief in her destiny to rule Egypt. Caesar, nearly 30 years her senior, was captivated. He had seen countless women throw themselves at him for power, but Cleopatra was different. She wasn't begging for his protection, she was offering an alliance. She promised that with his backing, she would stabilize Egypt and ensure Rome's continued wealth from its grain supply. For a man like Caesar, always thinking in terms of empire, it was an irresistible offer. Ptolemy XIII panicked when he learned Cleopatra had reached Caesar before him. He tried to rally his forces, but the Roman general was already on Cleopatra's side. A war broke out in the streets of Alexandria, culminating in Ptolemy's attempted escape. He drowned in the Nile, his golden armor weighing him down, and Cleopatra reclaimed her throne. To seal their alliance, Cleopatra and Caesar became lovers. She bore him a son, Ptolemy XV, better known as Caesarion. Little Caesar. Though Rome never officially acknowledged him as Caesar's heir, Cleopatra believed he was destined for greatness. For a brief moment, it seemed like Cleopatra had everything she wanted: power, an heir, and the favor of Rome's most influential man. But fate had other plans. Rome was calling Caesar back, and the tide of history was about to turn against them both. Cleopatra's time with Caesar had given her everything she needed: her throne, a powerful ally, and a son she believed could one day rule both Egypt and Rome. But dreams of empire shattered in 44 BC when Caesar was assassinated on the steps of the Roman Senate. Stabbed 23 times by his own men, he died without naming an official heir. Rome plunged into chaos, and Cleopatra suddenly found herself dangerously exposed. She fled back to Egypt, knowing that without Caesar's protection, she had few friends left in Rome. Her son, Caesarion, was a threat to those vying for power, particularly Octavian, Caesar's adopted nephew and heir. Cleopatra remained in Alexandria, waiting and watching as Rome tore itself apart in civil war. Two men emerged from the bloodshed: Octavian and Mark Antony, Caesar's trusted general. Unlike the calculating and cold Octavian, Antony was bold, impulsive, and larger than life. He was a warrior, a drinker, and a man who lived as if each day were his last. He was also in desperate need of money and allies, and Cleopatra had both. In 41 BC, Antony summoned Cleopatra to meet him in Tarsus, demanding her loyalty. But Cleopatra never let men summon her, she made them wait. When she finally arrived, it wasn't as a queen pleading for favor but as a goddess. She sailed into Tarsus on a magnificent golden barge, draped in silks, surrounded by musicians and servants dressed as nymphs and cupids. She played the role of Aphrodite herself, knowing exactly how to seize Antony's attention. It worked. Antony was mesmerized. That night, Cleopatra didn't just seduce him, she outwitted him, proving she was not just a lover but a ruler worth allying with. Their affair ignited instantly, burning with the same intensity as her alliance with Caesar. But this time, Cleopatra wasn't dealing with a calculating statesman. She was with a man who fought with his heart as much as his sword. They became inseparable. Antony abandoned his duties in Rome and followed Cleopatra to Alexandria, where they lived in extravagant excess. They formed a private drinking club, the Inimitable Livers, challenging each other to feasts and games of indulgence. Cleopatra even bet Antony that she could throw the most expensive banquet in history. To prove it, she took a massive pearl earring, dropped it into a cup of vinegar, let it dissolve, and drank it, one of the most famous and bizarre displays of wealth in history. But their love wasn't just for pleasure, it was political. Together, they dreamed of a new empire, one that could rival Rome itself. Antony married Cleopatra in an Egyptian ceremony and declared Caesarion as the rightful heir of Rome, openly challenging Octavian. The move was a direct threat, and in response, Rome turned against them. In 32 BC, Octavian declared war. Antony and Cleopatra's love had given them a kingdom, but it was about to cost them everything. By 32 BC, Cleopatra and Antony were no longer just lovers or rulers. They were enemies of Rome. Octavian, hungry for total control, declared war, branding Cleopatra as a dangerous foreign queen manipulating Antony. The Roman Senate, stirred by Octavian's propaganda, turned against them. The final battle for power would be fought on the sea, and history would remember it as the Battle of Actium. Cleopatra and Antony gathered their forces, but their armies were outmatched. Octavian's navy, led by his brilliant general Agrippa, cut off their supplies, slowly starving them into desperation. On September 2, 31 BC, their fleet met Octavian's forces off the coast of Greece. The battle was chaos, burning ships, clashing swords, men drowning in the waves. Then, in a shocking turn, Cleopatra's fleet suddenly broke away from the battle and fled. Some say she saw the battle was lost and chose to save herself. Others believe it was a planned retreat. Whatever the reason, Antony, seeing Cleopatra's sails disappear, believed she had abandoned him. Overcome with despair, he followed her, leaving his troops leaderless and sealing their defeat. Back in Egypt, Antony and Cleopatra were now cornered. Octavian's legions marched toward Alexandria, and the lovers faced a grim reality: they would never rule again. Antony, believing Cleopatra had already taken her own life, fell on his sword. But death was not immediate. As he lay bleeding, news arrived: Cleopatra was still alive. Servants carried Antony to Cleopatra's hidden chamber. In one final, agonizing moment, she cradled him as he died in her arms. "Do not mourn me," he whispered. "Only remember our love." Cleopatra knew what came next. Octavian would parade her through Rome as a trophy, a defeated queen chained in humiliation. She refused to let that happen. Instead, she chose her own death, one befitting a queen. Legend says she arranged for a venomous asp to be smuggled into her chambers, hidden in a basket of figs. She let the snake bite her, its poison coursing through her veins, taking her painlessly into the afterlife. But was it really a snake? Some believe she took poison instead, carefully measured to ensure a swift death. When Octavian's soldiers broke into her chamber, they found Cleopatra lifeless, dressed in royal robes, her golden diadem still shining. She had won, in her own way. Octavian, now the unchallenged ruler of Rome, ordered her son, Caesarion, executed, ending the Ptolemaic dynasty forever. Egypt became a Roman province, and Cleopatra's dream of a powerful Egyptian empire died with her. Her body was laid to rest beside Antony, just as she had wished. But her tomb, like so much of her life, remains a mystery. To this day, archaeologists search for her final resting place, hoping to uncover the truth behind her legendary end. Cleopatra was gone, but her name would never be forgotten. Cleopatra's death marked the end of Egypt's independence, but her legend only grew stronger with time. For centuries, poets, playwrights, and historians have painted her as everything from a cunning seductress to a tragic heroine. But the real Cleopatra was far more complex. She was a ruler who fought for her people, a strategist who played the most powerful men of her time, and a woman who refused to be controlled. Her legacy lives on in ways both grand and bizarre. Here are some of the strangest but true facts about Cleopatra. She was an Egyptian by blood. Despite being one of history's most famous Egyptian rulers, Cleopatra was actually of Greek descent. She belonged to the Ptolemaic dynasty, which had ruled Egypt since Alexander the Great's conquest. Unlike her predecessors, however, she embraced Egyptian culture, even presenting herself as the reincarnation of the goddess Isis. She spoke more languages than most modern scholars. Cleopatra was one of the most educated rulers of her time. She spoke at least 9 languages, including Greek, Egyptian, Hebrew, Arabic, and Aramaic. This made her one of the few Ptolemies who could communicate directly with her subjects without interpreters. The infamous pearl trick. One of Cleopatra's most outrageous stunts was a bet with Mark Antony that she could throw the most expensive banquet in history. To prove her point, she took one of the largest pearls in the world, dissolved it in vinegar, and drank it. Ancient accounts claim that the pearl alone was worth what would be millions today. She wasn't as beautiful as Hollywood thinks. Many people picture Cleopatra as a breathtaking beauty, thanks to films and art. But ancient coins bearing her image tell a different story. She had a prominent nose, sharp features, and may not have fit modern beauty standards. However, even Roman historians who hated her admitted that her intelligence and charisma made her irresistible. Her death remains a mystery. The story of Cleopatra's suicide by snakebite is legendary. but some historians believe she may have been murdered or poisoned by Octavian's forces. The truth remains unknown, as her body has never been found. Her tomb may still be out there. For centuries, archaeologists have searched for Cleopatra's lost tomb. Some believe it lies beneath modern Alexandria, swallowed by the sea. Others think it could be hidden near Taposiris Magna, a temple west of Alexandria, where excavations are ongoing. If found, it could be one of the greatest discoveries in history.